Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, October 19th, 2023. A lot of 19s, 20s, numbers in the same area. This means something somewhere to some numerologist and lottery player, I am sure. Good morning. Time for another show, as I earlier suggested, like immediately prior to what I just said. So you might have forgotten. Time passes. It's linear. You know how it goes. Time for another speaker vote, I think. They're voting again, or at least they're not yet giving up on voting for the speakership. And Jim Jordan has refused to take the hint in the same way that Steve Scalise did, and stands for election again. As far as I know, I think round 2 he actually came in with fewer votes. So some of the earlier predictions that there would be people abandoning him after the first ballot appear to be true. So that's kind of interesting and exciting as the development goes. And I even saw one report somewhere, not that I saved it for you or anything. So this is all hearsay, but did see one report that some of the stauncher opponents to Jordan's elevation to the speakership had agreed to stagger their votes in some ways, such that they would be voting, I guess probably keeping a finger to the wind and making sure that there weren't enough votes to accidentally elect him speaker. They agreed to rotate in their support or opposition for Jordan, and I guess keep the whip operation guessing as to how many votes they actually had. Quite clever, really. That would be an exciting development all by itself. Plenty of other things to bring to everyone's attention, including, oh, look at this. I have some messages, the usual thumbs up messages from Justice that things are working, come with notes and links and annotations today. Some stories I haven't seen. These look actually like, well, the first one is, okay, that's a bit of a mystery. What's going on here? 30 grandmas from the Grandma Knitters Guild showed up at the Capitol and chanted, "Free the," was that Skeins? MTG, Murdery Trader Green would call it an insurrection. Oh, yes. I didn't see what was going on there exactly, but I did see something today where, I think I saw Scott Charles on Twitter this morning saying, responding to somebody who was saying, well, are they going to treat these Capitol protesters as harshly as the January 6th protesters? I guess there was some sort of sit-in from, I don't know who, but, well, there are protests all the time. But sit-ins and demonstrations inside the Capitol complex buildings are ordinarily forbidden, and I guess they must have made some arrests today. But, yeah, naturally, the disingenuous Republican friends of the January 6th rioters keep asking that question. Are they going to be treated as harshly as the January 6th protesters who were just normal tourists? Well, probably not. And the reason for that is answered by voluminous and publicly available videotape of the level of violence that took place on January 6th. And if you would just open your eyes and allow yourself to see it, you would understand the explanation without any additional tutelage, I suppose. It's just really kind of crazy that there are still people who say things like this. The second story he sends my way, just by way of like good morning distraction stuff here. I don't even know. What's the story? Let's see. There's no better example of the two tiers of justice than Bret Baier's mansion being listed for $32 million. Bret Baier really, I guess, raking it in over there at Fox News. There's a picture of it. It looks, I guess, like the sort of thing that you would guess would go for $32 million in D.C. It's very mansion looking. And not that it will necessarily go for the asking price, as they note here. But all right, if it does go for the asking price, it'll be the most expensive D.C. sale of all time. So that's pretty. I didn't really think of Bret Baier as, at the pinnacle of Fox News. He's definitely, one of their top guys. But all right, $32 million. And where's he moving to? I guess that's the bigger question. All right, lots more to round up. We'll take a look at this thing and see if we can't figure out what's behind this sale. Is there any bigger story behind this? Does he look like is he on the lookout for a $60 million mansion? He can have my house. I'd sell it to him for, considerably. I'd say half price for that. So it's sort of like a lateral move. That way, if he sells for cash in D.C., he can just pay me off here. $32 million townhome in Loudoun County, or in the center of all the Fox News action. You wouldn't have to do any commuting whatsoever. All right, lots of other stories to round up. I don't know. There's war internationally. There's war here domestically among the Republicans, still trying to figure out who they think they want to be their speaker. The guy they're voting for or continue to try to install in the seat is just as horrible today as he was yesterday, although I guess more people are waking up to those facts as to exactly why he's terrible. And the longer this drags on, I suppose, the worse he looks, and that's okay, too. All right, good morning to Greg Dworkin, who arrived here just moments ago. You heard the ringy-dingy noise. How are you today?
We're doing okay.
Okay.
And don't forget, we might even get to Boris Johnson hiding in a refrigerator.
Oh, yes,
right.
right.
Yesterday.
Yeah, I put that, I read that out. I teased everybody with it, and all right. So we'll see if we get to it. We can make room for it in an hour or two, now that I have the article, though. But all right.
At least for the next few minutes, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the speaker stuff, because that is important. More than fascinating. It's important. It's fascinating. It's revealing. There's a whole lot there going on. But let's start with the mechanics.
All right.
Okay. Yesterday, when there was a vote, Jeffries got 212. So he continues to get 212 every time. And Jordan got 199, and everybody else got 22. Now, the first time they did this
altogether,
there were a whole lot of no's. But that was because they did it in a secret ballot.
All right.
If you recall, for whatever reason, they decided to try to figure out who the speaker was going to be by secret ballot. And then when it was clear that Jordan didn't have enough votes to go over the top to 217, they had a second one where it was, okay, rather than just pick who you want by secret ballot, then by secret ballot, what we're going to do is, if this goes to the floor, how will you vote? And on that one, he lost 55. It wasn't quite as many as he did the first time.
All right.
Let's start there.
Yes, right. Okay.
That's a bizarre thing to do in the first place. Once it was clear that in a secret ballot, they didn't want Jordan, you'd think that would be enough, but no, he kept going.
Yes.
They were telling him, we don't want you, and he wasn't listening. And that'll be a theme throughout the morning here. When we're talking about Jordan. But it's also a theme about MAGA. They don't want him. They don't like him. They are not beholden to him. They don't think he has what it takes to be speaker. They're telling him. Now, whose idea was it to do the secret ballot in the first place? It was stupid. It exposed his weakness from the get-go.
Yes.
So what was the point? I don't know. And it didn't even accomplish what the real point was. And the real point was, okay, now that in a secret ballot we see we're losing, I have a really clever idea that will absolutely positively work. And what we'll do is we'll have an open ballot. Okay, I'll lose.
All right.
But I'll find out who voted against me.
Yeah.
And then I'll have some of my buddies visit them and tell them, hey, it's a nice congressional office you got here. Too bad if something happened to it.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see how many votes we get based on that. That was the strategy.
That's a good one.
It backfired spectacularly. But let me give you an idea of how that goes. And this is just what I think is a remarkable statement from Marionette Miller Meeks. Quite a name.
Mouthful.
From Iowa, and released the following statement yesterday. I'll read it to you in its entirety. It's not that long, but it just tells you so much about what's going on.
Okay.
Yesterday, I voted to support Jim Jordan's candidacy for Speaker of the House. I voted for Jim Jordan for the greater good of the House Republican Party based on our conference meeting and the test speaker ballot that was cast earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, he failed the test speaker ballot.
Well.
Basically, what they're saying is, I don't like this, but I'll go along with it because it's best for the Republicans if at least we have somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean.
And the chaos is hurting us. Okay. I mean, it's also hurting the country, but that's not my concern. My concern is it's hurting the party.
Right.
And then she says, however, after one round of votes with my support, he was not able to secure enough votes for the speaker nomination, and my initial concerns about threatening tactics of Jim Jordan's supporters, including from members of Congress, increased despite assurances. Today,
what assurance?
It was yesterday, it became abundantly clear early in the roll call vote, that's the one where he lost 22 instead of 20 in public, that Jim Jordan still did not have the votes necessary to become speaker. Given the concerns I had before any vote and the ability of the speaker designee to unify the conference, I voted in support of Appropriations Committee Chairwoman Kay Granger.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's one of the barons, one of the dukes. Appropriations is a powerful committee, and she's not beholden to the House Freedom Caucus, and she and her buddies voted no.
All right.
I voted for Chairwoman Granger because she has demonstrated great leadership, whatever. However, since my vote, and this is the important part, in support of Chairwoman Granger, I have received credible death threats and a barrage of threatening calls.
Hey.
The proper authorities have been notified, and my office is cooperating fully. One thing I cannot stomach or support is a bully. Someone who threatens another with bodily harm, tries to suppress differing opinions, undermines opportunity for unity in regard for freedom of speech. That's why I spoke out forcefully against censorship and suppression during the COVID pandemic. I did not stand for bullies before I voted for Granger, and when I voted for Speaker Designee Jordan, and I will not bend to bullies now. I understand that voting against Representative Jordan is not popular. I respected Jim enough to vote for him, knowing he didn't have the votes. We had enough numerous calls to our office, and many have urged I support Jim Jordan, and many others urged me to look for a conservative consensus candidate. And then she goes on with the obligatory paragraph that all conservatives have to do whenever they're talking to an audience of how bad the Democrats are. That's not important. It was actually at the end instead of the beginning, where it usually is when you read conservative op-eds. We're all used to that by now. But in public, what she said is, I supported him because I thought being a good Republican, going along with the party. And then when he didn't win, I decided to vote for somebody else. And after that, they started to threaten me. And I'm telling you publicly, this guy's a bully who started to threaten me, and it's not going to work. And I'm telling you publicly, he's behind it. And I'm telling you publicly that it's awful. And what that represents...
I don't know. Maybe they were just tourists.
Maybe. What that represents is that he's still an insurrectionist. And what that represents is what you're seeing is the receding of the tide of MAGA power, which was highest under McCarthy.
Interesting.
Because they could push him around by threatening him. And now that it's all out in the public, it's not working the same way. So we've moved from McCarthy, get along, go along. But I'll secretly support, the insurrectionists, because I made that decision for God knows what reason a few days after January 6th, when I flipped from this is awful to, oh my God, I better support him and go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the guy's ring. I don't understand that. I still don't understand it. But that awful decision is how we got here. And we moved from McCarthy to Scalise, whose MO is traditional, pork. And that was rejected by a goodly number of the Republican Party for whatever reason. McCarthy and Scalise can't stand each other, and that's part of the dynamics. And then they moved to Jordan, and Jordan's MO is, I don't know how to legislate. I never legislated. I don't even know how to get a bill passed. I never watched Schoolhouse Rock. I don't know how it works. There's not a single bill ever proposed by me that ever even got to committee. However, I do know how to intimidate people. That's what I'm going to do. And it failed because it was made public. Now the House Freedom Caucus isn't going to get their speaker. You mentioned that the people who actually do know how this works, know how to count votes, know how to manage things and stagecraft things, had 20, then 22. Today they'll have 30 if there's a vote. Since Jordan doesn't like to lose, like most bullies, there probably won't be a vote because he knows he's going to lose 30 votes. And so what happened is they took him out. And now the House Freedom Caucus is really upset because their guy isn't going to win. Some of them aren't unhappy. People like Gates don't want power. They just want to be able to grandstand, so they don't care either way as long as they can raise money. But the fact of the matter is that the House Freedom Caucus is going to have a tremendously lower amount of power now than they did under McCarthy.
Womp womp.
Yeah. What do you think? How do you like them apples?
They're some of the best apples I've ever seen. They're terrific. It's not too well. I mean, it's an interesting twist and turn of events, but I guess it's not that surprising. MAGA Republicans are now going to attempt to exercise the power they've accrued. Oh, he set it on fire. Oh no, it's all ruined. Okay, I mean, I guess that's par for the course for them.
Washington Post headline:
Still,
Jim Jordan won't be the next speaker.
Shocking. All right,
he won't. I mean, that's pretty clear.
Thank God.
And he's not going to be successful.
There was a
and
moment
the question
there.
now is, given the fact that this has failed, you're embarrassing MAGA, you're losing. They hate losers. They are losers. They hate themselves.
Yeah.
And so what now? And so now you get into the really interesting dynamics. Okay, so now what do you do? Well, let me just read you some of the pieces here, some of the think pieces that people have had. And again, I've looked on Blue Sky. I've looked on Mastodon. I've looked on Threads. Twitter is still the best source to find breaking news and political thought. The others just aren't there. They're getting there, but they're just not there yet.
Okay. We'll get there already.
Yeah, that's what I say. So Manu Raju, CNN correspondent for Congress, says multiple GOP sources say that Jim Jordan is bleeding votes and is poised to lose even more Republicans if he goes through with a third ballot today. One GOP member who opposes Jordan says there's about 30 no votes. It's unclear if Jordan goes through with this or not. And again, that's the interesting thing. Kevin McCarthy and even Steve Scalise, but especially Kevin McCarthy, are famous for not being able to count votes.
Yeah.
That's why Nancy Pelosi said about this whole mess, this is a really instructive lesson in arithmetic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
She could count votes. She could deal with a vote Democratic majority and still get incredible stuff passed. He can't.
Yeah.
All right. So fine. Now we're getting to the point where Jordan can't do this either. Remember, they're always super confident because that's the only thing they know. Even when they're losing, they say they're winning.
Yes.
And Jim Jordan was going into this. I'm even more confident than usual that I've got all the votes. He didn't have the votes.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who were organizing the first 20, then 22, then 30, they know how to do this, and they are doing it. You pointed out it's really interesting. What's really interesting is that it's not the faction that's MAGA. It's the appropriations people and the old bulls and all that sort of stuff. They know how to do this, and they're doing it.
All right. Yeah, they. I mean, it's not that Republicans can't count votes. It's, I guess, I don't know whether they won't.
McCarthy can.
Or some of them just can't do it, but I mean, they clearly have some people who are capable. This is a delicate game to be swapping votes back and forth, but there are not that many of them, so I guess it's easier to coordinate. So they start small. That's good. We'll start by learning to count 30 votes and then see if we can do better.
But there's another side to it, and the other side is Marionette Miller Meeks.
Oh, yes. Okay. Right. Letting everybody
Sometimes
know.
It's good not to go out and say, I'm voting against Jordan because I don't want all these death threats from my family.
I mean, I don't.
So you have votes, and the ones who are scared go last.
Yeah.
Because there's
they should be scared,
in unity there is strength. And the people who don't care, like Kay Granger, go first.
Yeah.
And so you do have these in your back pocket, but you have to manage them.
Yes. It takes work.
And it takes work. And, these guys don't want to do work. They want to do performative stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Well, I like that it's now sort of out and open and on the record. And we might do well to remind everybody. Yeah, well, the reason that it rings true to you and the reason that you're not surprised that they work as bullies is this is the same dynamic as we've been going through with them for the last couple of years. We told you the guy was an insurrectionist. Somebody gasped about that and said, I can't believe you actually said.
Lisa Desjardins from NPR said, oh my gosh, the second, I think it was Catherine Clark, the second Democratic leader said he's an insurrectionist.
Yeah.
I can't believe she used that word.
Unbelievable. Yeah, well,
and then everybody, she got like 1,000. Look, here's where he's an insurrectionist. And she said, yes, but this means something really specific.
Yeah, but
it means he's an insurrectionist is what he means.
Yeah. He was leader
part of the plotting.
They came and whacked cops over the head with flagpoles and punched them in the face and, demanded that Mike Pence be brought out for hanging. And he helped. That's insurrection. And I would hope at this point, to no one's surprise, look, he lost the 2020 election, refused to accept it, because he can't count votes, just said, oh, well, I can't count them, so I can't prove anything. So the point is there must have been some sort of shenanigans somewhere. Let's kill everybody and then install my guy as leader. All right, well, that didn't work. It all fell apart. But now it's time to run for speaker. All right, we're going to have some votes. First, we'll have a secret vote. Then we'll have an open vote. Hey, I didn't win enough votes. Something must be wrong with numbers again. Numbers, they hate me. Kill everybody. I want you to go to the members of Congress who voted against me and tell them that they'll get killed if they don't change their mind. He's an insurrectionist.
Whatever you do, don't call. You can report this, and you can report it accurately, but whatever you do, don't call me an insurrectionist.
Yeah, sure. I guess not. And, of course, NPR and their tote bags of death are there to help, I guess.
Again, Marionette Miller Meeks, a conservative. I'm not saying that people like Liz Cheney and Marionette Miller Meeks should be the next president. I'm not saying you should vote for them if they're on the ballot for your senator. But they're doing the stuff that needs to be done. And I'll give you another name who was like the most surprising person to me in the world who's doing this. And that's Ken Buck. Talk about Patrick McHenry being a flamethrower in his early career.
All right.
Ken Buck is an absolute positive flamethrower, and yet, unlike, let's say, Chip Roy, he came to the conclusion that when push comes to shove, I spoke to Jim Jordan, I like Jim Jordan, I understand the conservative principles that he's trying to espouse, but I can't vote for him. Why can't I vote for him? Because he won't admit that Trump lost. And in fact, when it came to a first vote and a second vote, especially the second vote, I went to him. He said this publicly. I went to him and said, will you acknowledge that the 2020 election, Biden was the winner? He wouldn't do it. I'm not voting for him. I'm telling America that's why I'm not voting for this guy. In other words, he's an insurrectionist.
Yeah, well, it means it has to mean one of two things. Either that he's an insurrectionist and an idiot and actually believes somewhere in his addled mind that Trump did win, or another interesting possibility is he understands that Trump lost, but he himself is so afraid of what would happen if he said so in public that he won't do it, which is also interesting because I guess that's why he resorted to the bullying he resorted to. It's working on me, so it will probably work on everybody else too. So I guess if we're the first movers here and bully people, then I'll be the one who gets to bully people from now on. And I'm tired of being bullied, so I want to be a bully instead. Oh,
so Nancy Pelosi summed it up. This is quoted by Kyle Griffin in summing up the situation where Jim Jordan will not be speaker. She said, and I quote, "It was a triumph. It was a triumph for democracy in our country that an insurrectionist was rejected by the Republicans again as their candidate for speaker." I'm waiting for Lisa Desjardins to put that on PBS tonight.
Well, I guess you'll have to, right?
He's an insurrectionist.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, but she's just some sort of random backbencher. This
what
Pelosi
does she know?
Person. Okay.
She is now. She was there
has no
that
special
night
office.
working the phones trying to, protect American democracy. What are you saying?
Yeah.
If anybody knows who is an insurrectionist, she does.
That's right. She can count votes and she can count insurrectionists.
So
there's one right
Roger
there.
Goes on to say, if Jordan withdraws, other candidates could jump in the race. Jody Arrington, Jack Bergman, Mike Johnson,
Who?
Howard Johnson, Olson and Johnson, a whole bunch of Johnsons.
Johnson.
The people you never heard of because they all have generic names Johnson. And you can't tell who's who.
Yeah.
But they would all struggle to get the 217 votes. If there's another speaker's race, it could delay consideration of the resolution to empower Patrick McHenry as a temporary speaker. Now, a couple of things about that.
All right.
First of all, we told you weeks ago, Patrick McHenry might wind up being the default here.
Yeah.
And guess what? Patrick McHenry might wind up being the default here.
What?
But let me pose to you the procedural question.
That sounds hard. Yes.
If Congress is to function, what's better? Jordan withdraws, or Jordan doesn't withdraw but doesn't vote and simply remains the speaker designate, and then life goes on? What's better? What's worse?
Well, okay, I'm confused here. So if McHenry?
McHenry's going to be
Yeah.
the speaker pro tempore.
Okay.
Should Jordan withdraw from the race and say, I'm not running for speaker, I've lost? Or should he say, I'm the speaker designee, part of leadership, and I'll just not have a vote, like for months, maybe February. Maybe I'll just see if I
would
could,
he not have a vote?
blow up a couple of offices and maybe firebomb a few cars and see what happens.
Those are ideas. I don't know. I'm not certain what. Well, why wouldn't
he have a
vote?
For Congress, what's better?
Oh, well, I mean, for America, I mean, if Jim Jordan stops voting, that's awesome. But I don't know why he would do that. I'm not certain. What's the play? Is that a part of his trying to don the disguise of the speakership?
Well, first of all, he hates losing.
Okay.
So if he doesn't have a vote,
oh, you mean see, okay, no, he holds or requests no vote for the speakership.
Well, he already delayed a vote. He can delay a vote as often as he wants to.
I guess. Can he? Is it up to him, or is it just courtesy?
Well, who is it up to? There's no.
I mean,
leadership.
McHenry, I guess. I mean, he's the one. The one thing he's supposedly definitely empowered to do is to call the vote for the speakership. But I suppose if the designee comes to him and says, "I'd like to have this vote tomorrow instead of today," it's okay, sure, out of
after
courtesy.
The break, we'll talk about this. Who is the leadership he's supposed to talk about this with?
Me. And I say, wait until next week.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm still puzzled. So, okay.
Well, let's
return to this question. Yeah, let's do it again.
Let's have some basic tenets that we agree on.
Where am I?
It's good for Congress to pass things that help the United States.
All right. We'll grant that for now.
And it's bad if they
reserving the right to object, although I do not object at this time.
Yes. Well, we'll call the previous question and discuss the idea
I don't even know
what the United States needs right now.
Yeah.
Is money for Israel and money for Ukraine, and to pass at least a continuing resolution so that the Republican majority, which is a numerical majority but not a functional majority, can figure out what they want to do with appropriations bills, having already made an agreement with Biden that they broke. And so, the idea is you got to get stuff done, and that's the stuff you have to get done. Given that that's the case, what's best for Congress to move forward? Is it to have a functional speaker in Patrick McHenry? Is it for Jordan to withdraw and admit he lost? Is it for Jordan to not withdraw? Because if he doesn't withdraw, he remains part of leadership, and therefore they can keep an eye on him and keep him close. And who is leadership anyway? From a functional point of view, Kevin McCarthy has been acting as Jim Jordan's campaign manager. Losing because McCarthy can't count votes.
Right.
But the other guy in the background that's losing, of course, is Donald Trump, because Jordan's Trump's guy. Trump wanted McCarthy taken out. He told Gates this. Gates did it. Gates has been bragging about it. Gates doesn't care because all he wants to do is raise money and then run for governor in Florida. But the fact of the matter is that the House Freedom Caucus loses power. They can't, behind the scenes bully people as effectively because now everybody knows they do that. It's all public. So they've lost power. But who is Republican leadership to try to organize this stuff? What there won't be is Speaker Jeffries. What there won't be is power sharing. What there will be is because Republicans do not have a functional majority, there'll be more Democratic input into how things work, just like in the Senate, where it's pretty close, but just enough so that Democrats can get stuff done. And that's ultimately what's going to happen. The question is, how do we get from here to there?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, it's an interesting thought. I mean, it occurs to me that, this is clearly one of those situations that we never anticipated, and I guess the designers, the founders and designers of the institution never anticipated the possibility, for instance, that a guy who gets nominated by the majority party but can't put together the votes, but then doesn't concede that and drop out of consideration. What is that person? How do we handle him? Is he part of the leadership? Is he not part of the leadership? Does he have influence? And reporters don't know what to do. I guess he's a big deal. We should be talking to him. He's not the majority leader. There is a majority leader. By the way, that came up the other day too. Somebody did ask this question, and I guess the smartest thing that Steve Scalise did was drop out so that people would stop paying attention to him, because for a brief moment there was this question: are you still the majority leader? I mean, are you? You haven't resigned from that job, but you
what's
ran
the deal
for
with David
speaker.
Duke with baggage? I had forgotten all about that. Thanks for reminding me. I see it every single day in the press.
Yes. That was a fantastic thing he did to himself. He actually, now everybody pays attention.
Now everybody
to that
remembers
and
it.
Remembers it, even though it never have happened, which is terrific. But yeah, there was a brief question there, like, okay, if you're running for speaker, does that mean there's a vacancy for majority leader? And he, now that he lost, he said, oh no, there was never any vacancy. I didn't resign from that job. And then somebody, did ask the question, well, I mean, if the conference voted right now, would you be? What if somebody calls a vote? Is there a possibility that we could do this? And they very quickly, I guess, I wonder whether he dropped out so fast to sort of suppress that question from coming to the surface. But what is Jim Jordan? The Washington Post says he'll never be speaker. What is he? Is he the leader of the Republican Party in Congress in just the House?
We should ask Elise DeFrank.
Not
She
that.
knows.
Yeah.
Congratulations to
who
our
do you
speaker
think?
designate.
Yeah. Who do you think is the leader of the Republicans? That's a good question. What day is it? I don't know. So we don't know what he is. Maybe he views this the opposite way from Scalise. There's nothing for him to be ejected from. Although, I guess if he hangs on and makes more trouble and just makes more and more Republicans miserable, they may say, what if the newfound power of the people who want to be described as moderates, even though they're not moderates, in the Republican Party, what if they start saying, well, I don't know who the next speaker is going to be, but it seems increasingly likely that that person will be selected by, or, the arrangements will have been made by us, and they'll be beholden to us. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I would really like to see, it's not just that I don't want Jim Jordan to be speaker. It's that I would like for the next speaker to recognize that it's not wise to keep Jim Jordan as chairman of the Judiciary Committee either. Oh. Yeah. And is that a promise you're extracting from somebody in order to be the new speaker? That would be interesting. What if the whole thing is, sure, you want to be speaker? The answer to that is no. But in addition to that, the only guy who ever thought it was a good idea for you to be chairman of the Judiciary Committee was the first guy in this chain rejected and kicked out of the job. So, one of the big problems was
why Kevin McCarthy is awful. And with this mess and with the loss of power on the side of MAGA and the House Freedom Caucus, it's yet another reason why it was a great idea for Democrats not to support Kevin McCarthy.
Yes. That's true, and it's becoming clear just how much chaos this really could cause. And I guess everybody, if it had worked quickly and there had been a new speaker selected quickly and they moved on, everybody would have said, all right, well, there was a vacancy in the speakership and they filled it. That makes sense to me. I guess we're done here. But as it drags on, you could start seeing people say, do any of the Republicans selected under the old regime retain their position? Is Kay Granger chair of the Appropriations Committee? I think so. She thinks so. Marionette Miller Meeks thinks so. But would she be? I don't know. I mean, I guess since it's her faction ascendant, the answer is yes. But if that's the case, does it mean that people from the other factions who hold chairs lose them? Not
unlikely,
necessarily the case.
They don't.
Very unlikely. They don't want more chaos.
Divisiveness, as they say. But I'll tell you what. Since we're on the topic of, this is something to think about. I'm going to give a homework assignment to all of you listeners out there, or at least Chip Roy did.
Oh.
Chip Roy says, if the House GOP dares cut a deal with Democrats to empower a Speaker pro tem in violation of tradition and norms, he's talking about Patrick McHenry,
that would not be
and possibly the Constitution to likely pass another CR at Pelosi levels and more supplemental not paid for, including Ukraine, well, the GOP might as well be the Whigs.
All right.
Your homework assignment is go look up Whigs so you can find out a little more about him and why he's saying that.
All I really
Everybody
remember
says,
about him was
you went the way of the Whigs because they're not here anymore.
Yeah,
what does that mean?
There was a party.
That's your homework
gone. That's it. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember what it was that they stood for per se.
We just know they're gone.
Yeah. All right.
Passenger pigeon, dodo, extinct. That's what you know. Well, what about them exactly? What do you know about them? Nothing. It's just they're not here anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, neither is McCarthy's speakership, neither is Scalise's speakership, and neither now will Jordan's speakership still be here. Those are all certainly Whig-ish in the sense that they died out. But yeah, this is I guess this too is a part of the same thing I was thinking of about what happens if Jordan, clearly losing these votes, just asks McHenry, and I guess it's still, I mean, it was initially assumed and stated as fact that the guy who would be in charge of holding the votes, calling the votes, and administering the vote for speaker would be McHenry. So I assume that the scheduling of votes is at bottom up to him, but that he takes under advisement, requests from Jordan and the Republican leadership about when to hold those votes and is just amenable to doing it when they want. I don't know that that's always going to be the case, but I doubt very much that the founders ever pondered what happens if one party the majority party nominates a candidate for speaker, but they just decline to hold a vote at any point. It doesn't make their designate into a speaker. But internally, inside of the Republican conference, it raises some questions. Well, you've nominated the guy, but one, under weird circumstances, he lost the first vote, and then, didn't secure enough to become speaker on the floor. But they had a vote, Scalise or Jordan, and Scalise won that. And there's another election that he doesn't accept the outcome of, by the way, Jim Jordan. And works to overturn it instead. But, it was always the assumption that a person selected as the nominee for speaker would be anxious to go to the floor and hold this vote. So there was never any question of, how do we regard this person and what power does he hold if he just drags it out for a month, a year?
Yeah.
So he never would. Stuff. Why would you? There's no power in it. I don't know. But there's more power in dragging it out than giving up.
Well, you could still block stuff. You could always block stuff. The question is, can you get anything done? And Jim Jordan has never gotten anything done. He's never made deals. He's never made coalitions. He's never passed legislation. So, there we have it.
And Chip Roy
Bloomberg
stepped
back and looked at this. This is their editorial board. House Speaker debacle is a warning sign. Too many lawmakers now prefer social media preening to actual governing. It's corroding the entire political system. This from the people whose reason for being is making money. Now, nobody wants to be speaker, except for the people who want to be speaker. It is, now absolutely acknowledged as being the worst possible job in Washington, at least right now.
Yeah, all right.
And speakers have always been coalition builders. That's why it's just absurd to think that Jordan should be anywhere near this.
Yeah.
Speakers don't come into power because everybody loves them. Speakers come into power because they can manage coalitions. That's the only reason that they get anywhere. Usually it's from giving money to people, but for whatever reason, you have to be able to manage that coalition. And managing it
proxy for being
is completely absent from the Republican lexicon at this point, and that's why they can't get anything done. Now, McCarthy could barely do it, and that's only partly because he couldn't count votes. He could certainly dole out money, but he couldn't manage a winning number of people to vote for a thing. And so if you don't have a functional majority, the founders didn't anticipate this, but I'm not sure how much they anticipated political parties anyway.
No, they wanted not to. I mean, there were some, and wishful thinking to hope that somehow Congress would function without them, but they definitely anticipated them and discouraged them, but I don't know if this is why necessarily, but
anyway, when we talk about uncharted territory, this is exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So we don't know what happens next. We don't know if there'll be a vote today. We don't know if there is a vote. What will Jordan do after he loses? We don't know if Patrick McHenry can become the functional speaker. We don't know if and when the important stuff that needs to pass, when it will pass, And so it's a mess, and they have themselves to blame. And so naturally they're going to blame Democrats for not getting them out of this mess. But that's not working with the press. Not with the strong arm tactics and the marionette Miller Meek statements that get reporters on their fainting couches. Not with Nancy Pelosi referring to them as insurrectionists. It's just not going to work.
Okay. Well, it will be interesting to see how long this goes on. I mean, I do maintain that if they need to, if there's popular support, both sides of the aisle, one side only, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But if you can put together 217 votes for bringing a measure to the floor to fund, Ukraine, to fund the war in Israel, to pass a CR, if that's something the House wants to see done, and there's 217 of them in any mix that just want it done, publicity be damned, they can do it, and they can give McHenry the power to preside over it. That's easy enough, I think.
Right. And at the same time, all of these shenanigans and the strong-arming and making it public has made it a lot harder for MAGA to block some of the stuff that needs to be done. So when Biden goes in the Oval Office tonight and speaks to the nation tonight about Israel and Ukraine, which he's planning to do, the old man, who can barely put two sentences together and somehow needs help, remembering where he is in the Oval Office, managed a whirlwind tour of the Middle East, adjusting on the fly, making Israel love him, and now is on his way back and is going to give an Oval Office speech. All of that Biden senile stuff is just so much garbage.
Yes.
And you can see that exposed.
By the way,
but given that that's a fact, he's going to put tremendous pressure on the Congress, in fact, to do that Israel-Ukraine stuff.
Yeah. And so if they feel the pressure and they want it done, they can order it done. And if using McHenry to preside is the easiest way to do that, they can go ahead and opt to do that and limit his power. It can just say, for this case, and this bill will allow it. For that bill, we'll allow it. It's easy enough. They do that all the time anyway.
Yep.
I guess the question is, how long can it go on?
They deem it reasonable.
Yeah, essentially. And I guess it can go on indefinitely, although here's another question about, all right, well, again, the House can empower him to do whatever they want, but there will be some instances where it will be less clear that they can raise a majority to to authorize it. For instance, if this were to go on for several months at a time, one of the things that people don't notice that the speaker does because it's just routine and they do it all the time and there's never any question, will they do it? The only time it came up into question was when people were saying, well, what about if they make, like Matt Gaetz said, let's nominate Donald Trump and make him Speaker of the House. You don't have to be a member of the House, everybody. We can make Donald Trump the Speaker of the House. And it was easier to imagine the things that he might do wrong on purpose to screw with things. And we don't really necessarily think of Patrick McHenry doing the same thing. But rather than doing it as sabotage, somebody will ask, is the Speaker of the House or the acting Speaker pro tem empowered to do this, do that? Now, apparently he's exercised the power to allocate office space and the control of rooms in the Capitol complex by taking them away from Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer. That's questionable about whether he really had that power, but they let him exercise it. Come early next year, it's the Speaker's role to formally invite the president to deliver the State of the Union address in the hall of the House.
Won't be Jim Jordan.
It won't be Jim Jordan doing it, but will it be Patrick McHenry? And will he say, will MAGA reassert itself and say, we demand, there's no way we're going to allow you to extend that invitation to Biden and remain in office as acting Speaker pro tem. I don't know whether they have the muscle to do that. I don't know whether, how long, I guess it depends, can the moderates,
the straightforward procedural question that nobody's been able to answer.
Oh, okay.
Right? If you have a speaker, then you can bring up a motion to vacate.
Yes.
Can you do that with a speaker pro tem?
Right. We don't know.
We don't know.
There's no rule that says there's not I guess, again, anytime, if you can put 217, I hate using the number. There must be some number of absences. 218 is a majority of the House. And I'm trained to stick to that. But
let's stick to that.
Yeah. So if you can put together a majority, I guess, yes. Well, you can't vacate the acting speakership pro tem because it's not in the rules. I know, but
you can resolve whatever the hell you want to resolve.
Right, and if the parliamentarian says, no, you can't, and you say, yes, we can, then fine. But, yeah, it'll take some organizing. It's not clear that they can organize.
Right, and they can't count, so there's that.
Yeah.
So let me give you an idea what the public thinks about all of this.
Oh, what do they know?
They may not know who Jim Jordan is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's the pervert guy from Ohio.
Well, for example, this is a new Navigator survey out this morning.
All right.
What do you think of Kevin McCarthy?
Tell people.
Favorable, unfavorable. McCarthy is at minus 23 because they know who he is, 23 to 46.
Okay.
And Gaetz, they know who he is. He's got a big mouth. He's at minus 25.
Big forehead.
They had forgotten about David Duke with the baggage. He's only at minus 6, and Jordan is only at minus 7.
So yeah,
I would
that's another good
reason. They don't know
who
he is yet. But they're starting to learn, because here's the other thing that I found out about civics, Navigator survey, that I just thought was really fascinating. Do you approve or disapprove of the way GOP and Congress are handling their jobs?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do. One of them.
You approve of the way the GOP and Congress are handling their jobs because they're making it much more likely to elect Democrats.
Yeah, I love it.
Next time. I love that part.
They're doing a great job.
So overall, 26 to 69.
Okay.
Overall, they're a minus 43.
Nice.
But here's the interesting part, starting to break it down by party. Okay. If you ask Democrats what they think of the job Republicans are doing from September 11th, and there were 2 surveys in September, on the 11th, the 25th, October 9th, and October 16th.
Coincidentally.
Okay. If you ask Democrats what they think of the job Republicans are doing, it hasn't changed at all.
Okay.
It was September 11th, they thought it was minus 75, and October 16th, it's minus 76.
Oh, that's one.
If you ask independents, what they think, they didn't like Republicans minus 47 back in September. Now it's minus 56.
Oh.
Okay, so drifting down a little bit, 9 points they lost. Here's a really interesting thing. If you ask Republicans what they think of how Republicans are doing, on September 11th, Republicans were positive plus 19 about Republicans in Congress.
Plus 19, okay.
Right? Then on the 25th, they were plus 17. By October 9th, they were only a plus 3. Now they're minus 4. Oh. Republicans don't like what Republicans are doing in Congress.
Ooh. All right.
They've lost 23 points based on all of this stuff.
Should we hurry out and do a generic ballot poll?
Well, you know.
They'll change their minds for that one.
Yeah, there's time between now and
there would be other Republicans who would do a better job.
So, how's the GOP doing in Congress? 26 to 69 on Navigator. And if you think that's way out in left field, no. Here is civics on the Republican Party favorability as of this morning. 25 favorable, 64 unfavorable. They really peaked at the beginning of the year in January. They were at 36 favorable. Now they're down to 26, so they've dropped 10 points. Basically, what the independents think is what's driving all of this. And I just think it's interesting that the Republicans are not helping themselves in that regard. And what the mechanics and the effects of that will be remain to be seen. You know, my point of view from most voters is they don't know who both of their senators are. They could probably name one. Most of them can't name both. And so they may not know, let's say, who Patrick McHenry is right now, or whether or not there's the ability technically to do a motion to vacate for the chair. You know, these are not things that occupy normal people.
Well, yeah.
We're not normal.
Far from it.
Right. But at the same time, you know, if everybody hates what the Republicans are doing, that seeps in. So, you know, we'll see what happens. The first wave of elections is going to be just in a couple of weeks, including your state, Virginia.
Right.
Still too close to call, so we don't really know what's going on there.
I'm calling it. We win.
Yeah, we do know that people want abortion rights preserved, and they don't like Glenn Youngkin's proposal to make it 15 weeks because nobody trusts him, but at the same time they like him. You know, so you read the surveys and you go, I don't know.
They're wrong about that. They don't like him. I'll tell them.
Yeah, okay. So that's the background for all of this. So Republicans don't have the country's support in what they're doing. It's not like it's right after the election where everybody wants them to go ahead. You know, everybody understands you can't really trust Republicans. Republicans don't trust Republicans.
They don't know what's happening. They don't know how it works. They can't do the mechanics.
By the way, Nancy Mace is not a moderate.
No, she's not. She's been out of the news though lately. She's either
probably frustrates her.
Yeah, I wonder whether she's going to pull a stunt. She's got to. Maybe she can make a nominating speech. Will Elise Stefanik allow that?
Oh, can I give you some breaking news?
Sure.
And this has to do with Georgia and the trials.
Oh,
as you may know,
heard from them in a while.
Ken Chesebro and Sidney Powell had their motions to get rid of this case denied yesterday by the Fulton County judge.
Okay,
they wanted, to make it go away. It wasn't relevant. Ken Chesebro lost his.
We're back to Chesebro. Is that the new?
Yeah, motion to disallow certain evidence because lawyer-client privilege, and the judge said, nah, fraud crime exception. So all of that stuff went yesterday. Just now breaking, attorney Sidney Powell is taking a plea deal in Fulton County.
Oh, wow.
One day before jury selection was set to begin for her election interference case alongside Ken Chesebro.
All right.
She wanted an early trial.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she got it.
And
she was going to get it.
And again, let me just step back and say something we've mentioned all along. Part of Fani Willis's bringing all of these people in a RICO setting is to try to get some of these people to flip. This is the biggest fish that's flipped so far. And like Mary Peltola, we are pro-fish.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, I don't know how much value there is in prosecuting the case, how much they get out of this, because in the end, what you get is Sidney Powell. So I don't know, can she testify powerfully on behalf of the prosecution? Don't need it. I mean, let's just get her out of the way. And even if she doesn't provide any useful testimony against Trump, it's a good idea. I mean, it'll be a great sign if she takes a plea deal and gets sentenced very quickly between now and the time that Trump is set to go on trial in Fulton County. That's going to depress and enrage him that. I mean, I don't think he has any love for her anymore, but still, it will look terrible.
Disagree. I mean, it will look terrible. But first of all, you start with Fonnie Willis's RICO case already has somebody who's guilty.
Yeah, and it's a big name now. I mean, everyone.
It's a big name, and it's a big deal that somebody's already guilty. You know, there's something to this case. You want to keep saying, "Oh, it's all political." It's all. They're guilty. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two.
That's
what
true.
is the what are the chances? What are the odds that Sidney Powell did anything all of a sudden out of the blue by herself?
I don't know. She's
0.
Weird. I mean.
The idea that
that's certainly the story they want to tell.
Who told her to do it?
Yeah. I mean, all I'm saying is that as a witness, I mean, if you ask her, well, who told you to do it? And she says, Yargle Bargle, Kraken. Like, I don't know what to do with that.
What if she says Roger Stone?
Yeah,
I mean, for the sake of argument.
I guess there's that. And then, so she says that, and then her, or Roger Stone's lawyers jump up and say, yeah, but
Meadows?
She's liable to say Yargle Bargle, Kraken to anything. Says the fact that she said my name means nothing. It's just, this is the state of dementia she's in at the moment. Well, that may or may not work. I mean, if she stands up and names you, then I know she's nuts, and you could convince me, oh, she's actually just having a fever dream right now. Oh, yeah,
what
maybe.
If she says
but
Mark
the rest
Meadows, and by the way, he's also a defendant.
Yeah,
putting more pressure on him to flip.
How will the rest of the world take it when she says that? They may just say, well, I mean, I heard she was crazy, but that doesn't mean I think she's delusional right now.
What if she says,
well,
and I kept notes?
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know. Well, you know what they say. Make a plea deal with the Kraken. That's what you do with Krakens.
What if she says, I have tapes?
Release them. Yeah. All right. Well, then that would be something. Because then it's like, well, all right. You may be crazy, but the tapes are real.
I'm telling you, this is a BFD. We just don't know the ramifications yet.
I'll take it. I question her value in providing live testimony.
She's not a valued person, right? She's not a person of value. But she's certainly a person of interest, says the law.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, depending on what they discover in her storage units or wherever, that could be huge trouble. I mean, even if
plea deal unless you cooperate.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, well, that'll be interesting to see it be revoked for non-cooperation eventually. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's like I never left, not only because it was a 1 minute break, but more show happens during that one. Well, no, not really. You're not being deprived of anything, but there's always more discussion afterwards. All right, yeah. So, how do we regard the Sidney Powell news? It is huge news. There's no doubt about that. I think I may be overthinking it, like because we've been steeped in the case and we know just how nutty and out of it Sidney Powell can be. We'd be torn, right? If Sidney Powell suddenly started spilling her guts about things that were clearly strategically horrific for Trump, we would say, this is great. This is awesome. But in the back of our heads, we would know, and there's some chance that she's just yargle-bargling right here. And surely the other lawyers will immediately throw her under the bus. Like, Trump's lawyers don't owe her anything. As long as she's saying good things for Trump and out there yargle-bargling about releasing the Kraken and we're going to win in court, etc., then they love her and they bring her into the Oval Office and everything. Even though it is, but out there on the record is memos and emails from people inside the Trump inner circle saying, oh my God, someone let Sidney Powell into the Oval. We got to get her out of here because we acknowledge that she's crazy. So they would no doubt, when she offers her testimony, be there to say she's a well-known crazy idiot. We don't like her. And she's a hostile witness. She's made a deal to save her own skin, and she never had her head screwed on right in the first place anyway. And here are some of the items that the prosecution has entered into evidence showing that we have known for many years that she's a crackpot and an idiot. So this isn't even hypocrisy and doing a heel turn with her. It's just, we've always known her to be an unstable moron and an idiot. And we've said so. And it's no different now that she's turned against us. But, yeah, I mean, that also means that she's likely to bring, if not tapes, then certainly other communications. Although, I don't know what she has that hasn't been forced out of her hands in the investigation and with subpoenas so far. But if she has something else and she turns it over, that might be of interest. So, let's see. Greg sent me the breaking news source here was Caitlin Collins tweeting just minutes ago, I guess. Sidney Powell's cut a plea deal and is expected to plead guilty in Georgia one day before her trial was set to begin. Oh, there's a missing space here, so it says setto begin. It makes it look like some sort of Italian musical notation, but setto I don't think is anything. Anyway, as part of her guilty plea, Powell will be required to testify at future trials. Like I said, of questionable value, perhaps, but it's good publicity anyway. And this is the weird part. Write an apology letter to the citizens of Georgia, prosecutors said at a hearing Thursday. That's today, according to Marshall Cohen, who is another CNN reporter. And oh, look at that! I went to hover over the name here I don't use Twitter much anymore, but Caitlin Collins. I don't think I was following her, but I've seen her, all over the place. And then she says that Marshall Cohen is doing the reporting. Why are we not hearing it from Marshall Cohen? I don't know. He's busy writing something. Then I hovered over. Marshall Cohen follows you. What? Oh, okay. Look at that. Marshall Cohen, CNN reporter. I cover major DOJ probes, congressional inquiries, and legal cases. All right. Well, I can see why I'd be following him. I don't know why he's following me. I guess we're doing a good job. Okay. So there you go. That is pretty weird. Oh, Caitlin has come back and corrected her typo and now says set to, not setto begin. But okay. Apology letter. I don't know what that's worth, but it's kind of funny. And it'll be interesting to see what it says given, her propensity for yargle-bargle. Whew, let's see. Now Chesborough, are we now calling him Chesborough? I recall that, I don't know whether I'm imagining it, but my recollection now is that Greg said that there was some, I think we did shift to a different pronunciation for him. All right. But speaking of Chesborough, whatever, that's what he calls himself, Chesborough. Okay. And we did hear from somebody, I guess his nickname was from college days, so people called him the Cheese. But, that might just be a play on the name. And all right, well, at any rate, Chesborough, that's more in keeping with the spelling, if you ask me. He's in the news today, too, because his request for a speedy trial and a separate trial means that he finds himself in the dock very quickly. And I wonder whether he's recalculating the benefit of that now that he gave the idea to Sidney Powell, and Sidney Powell is cutting a plea deal over it. Not clear from my recollection of the development of the case how much contact Powell and Chesbrough had between themselves. I mean, I'm certain that he considered himself a serious lawyer and not of the same type at all as, say, Linwood and Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani. But, nonetheless, they all worked together at some level anyway. So it'll be interesting to see what effect that has on his case. And I'll read you the story of why he's in the news in just a minute. One more thing that Greg sent our way, the tweet of Eric Wasson saying that the Republicans will be meeting at 11 right after the show. They're going to stick around and listen to the show about so they know what could happen to them if they decide to hold another vote. They're going to meet at 11 per Jordan. So is Jordan's the source on that one? So he's still the guy looked to as the authoritative source on when the Republican conference will meet. It's an interesting question. Like, who gets to call a meeting of the Republican conference? I mean, ostensibly that would be Elise Stefanik, right? Isn't she conference chair right now? That's why she gets to do things like make these weird, otherworldly Sidney Powell-esque nominating speeches. But again, everybody looks to Jordan as the ostensible leader of the Republicans in Congress, and it's not at all clear that he is that. But he says they're going to be meeting at 11. Okay, let's see. And he's also sent news. Let's see. New Biden and Senate set the stage for massive national security funding package. Senator Graham, Lindsey, backs Biden's decision to group Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan all together in terms of getting aid passed. The outcomes of these conflicts matter greatly to our national security. Big elevation for the Taiwan situation there. There's shooting wars elsewhere. Lindsey Graham really desperately, I guess, probably wants to see one in Taiwan too, for whatever reason. McConnell, it is said, is on the same page. Is this the tweet that has that information in it? Yes, Andrew Desiderio with that news. Okay, so with Biden and the Senate interested, now I guess the question becomes, right, can the House empower McHenry to bring this to the floor? It's very confusing, the McCarthy and McHenry. And given that they're having difficulty with the mechanics, the McCarthy-McHenry mechanics thing is getting us crossed up. All right, let's see. Let me go back to Pocket where I put something from this morning that my brother Mark sent along. He spotted the Chesbrough news here. And let's see how it plays in light of the Sidney Powell revelation and whether I think that makes any big difference. The Times was reporting yesterday, was it? Trump lawyer, that would be Chesbrough, acknowledged political agenda in election suit, emails show. Kenneth Chesbrough's comments undercut assertions that Donald Trump's lawyers were simply providing legal advice in challenging the 2020 results. One of the nuances of their positions in the case, both Trump's position about how he's approaching the prosecution of his case and Chesbrough is, well, all we were doing was saying, look, you are the one, Trump, who believes you've won the election. We're merely, as your counsel, showing you the only path we see as a possibility for you to win your claims is this. We were just doing that as zealous advocates, lawyers that you hired to help you formulate your arguments, whether you go ahead and press the case, whether you press the case in other ways outside of the law, or whether you do or don't believe your case is not of any concern to us. You asked us for a legal argument. We provided it. That's a First Amendment right. It means that our communications should be privileged as lawyer-client, with lawyer-client privilege. But as Greg pointed out, no, if the judge says, well, we're going to dispense with that because you were in the middle of committing a crime. That's a crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. But Chesborough is trying to argue there was no crime here. This is just being an advocate for my client. And well, let me let Maggie Haberman and Luke Broadwater lay out the story, even if you don't want Maggie Haberman doing it. That's who's done it here, and that's all I've got for you. On December 24th, 2020, when he should have been surely busy preparing for putting the Christ back in Christmas, he was instead meeting with other lawyers, fighting to reverse Donald Trump's election defeat, and they were together debating whether to file litigation contesting Joe Biden's victory in Wisconsin, a key swing state. Mr. Chesborough argued there was little doubt that the litigation would fail in court. He's right about that. He put the odds of winning at 1%. That's a quote. As Trump continued to push his baseless claims of widespread fraud, according to emails reviewed by the New York Times. But the relevant analysis, Chesborough argued, is political. So it's interesting to get this from somebody who says, I wasn't making a political argument. I was making a legal argument and a legal argument only. But all your notes say that the legal argument has, one, a 1% chance of succeeding, and two, that the argument you're really making is chiefly political in nature, so that's weird and different from what you're saying. The emails have new significance because Mr. Chesborough is scheduled to be one of the first two of Trump's 18 co-defendants to go on trial this month. And there's not that much of this month left. It's already October 19th. Go on trial this month on charges brought by the district attorney's office in Fulton County, Georgia. The indictment accused Chesborough of conspiring to create slates of so-called, I don't know why they call it so-called, fake electors pledged to Mr. Trump in several states that Mr. Biden had won. Of course they're fake electors. He didn't win those states. Mr. Chesborough's lawyers, make attorneys get attorneys in MAGA, right? Chesborough's lawyers have argued that his work was shielded by the First Amendment and that he acted within his capacity as a lawyer. They have called for his case to be dismissed, saying he was merely researching and finding precedents in order to form a legal opinion, which was then supplied to his client, the Trump campaign. Of course, there wouldn't really be much precedent in making fake slates of electors and telling them to forge documents. But hey, something, First Amendment. Now, Scott R. Grubman, that's the lawyer, or a lawyer for Mr. Chesborough, said lawyers often argue for positions that are not widely held. For example, any lawyer who has ever filed a pleading challenging existing Supreme Court precedent falls within this category, he said. Maybe a long shot, but far from criminal. In fact, it's how the law changes over time. Of course, if the question is, should this be covered or not under contractual law with, someone's private health insurer? And the current state of the law is that this is interpreted to mean that it is not covered. But you argue for a new interpretation that would end in, the analysis would end in the ailment being covered instead, despite what the contract says. Yeah, you can see how it's very difficult to describe that as breaking the law. But if you are arguing, well, it's not widely held as an opinion that anybody can make themselves a member of the Electoral College if they have a word processor and a printer. But we argue that it should be allowed. And that it should be allowed, not only should it be allowed, but if you disagree that it should be allowed, we'll send a mob to Congress to beat you over the head with a flagpole, mace you, and hit you with a fire extinguisher until you die. That sort of thing. Well, it's not widely held as an opinion that that would be okay, but we were hoping that you would see your way clear to viewing it that way today. Gosh, that's different, and you may in fact be involved in a criminal conspiracy. Okay. Well, that is very different. But, of course, he's not going to argue that. He's not going to offer that up. Someone else, the prosecutors, are going to have to make that argument. Mr. Trump has also signaled that one of his possible defenses is that he was simply acting. Oh, we get to use our acting thing, right? So I was merely acting. That's right. I was simply acting on the advice of lawyers. But Mr. Chesborough's emails could undercut any effort to show that the lawyers were focused solely on legal strategies. Why is that important? It's not really stated here, but we'll just, I think, add some, what I think will be helpful, connective tissue. Trump is saying, I'm going to use one of my defenses is, I was simply acting on the advice of my lawyers. And that sometimes, not always, but sometimes works when your lawyers can show what Chesborough is claiming here, which is, I was just doing research and learning the precedents and formulating an argument, even if it isn't in accordance with the precedents, that we thought judges might buy and be willing to overturn precedent. So all I was doing was providing legal advice. Okay, can I see your legal advice? It's because should be contained in your emails between you and the Trump. Well, should be between you and the Trump campaign, but oddly enough, it's between you and the Trump White House, which is problematic in its own right. But at any rate, let me see those emails. They should, by rights, be chock full of, my legal advice to you is, and this is merely legal advice. I don't know if it's going to work, but this is what I would argue in court. But instead, it turns out that the emails are all about political advice, which is not what lawyers provide in court. And although lawyers sometimes do provide political advice or even PR advice, it's a little bit questionable about whether or not it falls into the attorney-client privilege in the same way that legal advice clearly would. It's true that lawyers give all kinds of advice and even do it in their capacity as a lawyer, but it takes a lot to pierce that veil and to say, yeah, we think that this comes out from under the privilege, or that the privilege doesn't apply. But if you're also operating in a context where the judge is saying, well, there's just not going to be a strong presumption of attorney-client privilege in this case because of the crime-fraud exception, you're going to find yourself very quickly, well, you'll certainly find yourself potentially in trouble because you're going to have to reveal a lot more about what you discussed to the court than you thought you were going to when you were first operating. And if it turns out that most of your writing is about non-legal issues, well, even less reason for protection of those communications. And of course, then we'll be allowed to read them and they'll just look that much worse for you. For instance, Chesborough's emails could undercut any effort to show that the lawyers were focused solely on legal strategies, as they should be if they're asserting this privilege. Rather than considering just the law and the facts of the case, Mr. Chesborough made clear he was considering politics and was well aware of how the Trump campaign's legal filings could be used as ammunition for Republicans' efforts to overturn the results when Congress met to certify the Electoral College outcome on January 6th. Just getting this on file means that on January 6th, the court will either have ruled on the merits or, vastly more likely, will have appeared to dodge again, Chesborough wrote in the email chain. He added that a lack of action by the Supreme Court would feed the impression that the courts lacked the courage to fairly and timely consider these complaints and, justifying a political argument on January 6th, that none of the electoral votes from the states with regard to which the judicial process has failed should be counted. So, I mean, again, arguably, and in many other cases, if it wasn't for the fact that you were actually advocating the violent overthrow of the United States government, but if you were advocating for some other thing that isn't supported by the current state of the law, you might be able to get away with the fact that you're writing not necessarily solely about legal functions and legal opinions, but also including PR advice and whatnot. They'd still say, you're still providing it in the context of your legal representation here. But, one, if you haven't filed any of your cases, it's a lot harder to claim that you're giving legal advice. Well, no, it isn't. I mean, it's not impossible. But I guess that would certainly make it clear. But I'm hedging here because it's also clearly within the realm of legal advice if you're giving somebody advice about how to avoid litigation. So maybe that's unfair to say. But what he's saying here in this part of the notes is, well, if we file this case, one, we have about a 1% chance of winning. But what's more important is that it's more likely that they won't even rule on this case. If they do rule on it, there's only a 1% chance we win. But let's file anyway, because there's almost no chance they'll really get to a point where they can actually rule substantively on this case. There's only like 2 weeks left before January 6th. But what filing does is give us the ability to argue to the mob, hey, we tried to do this the peaceful, democratic way and take it to the courts, but the courts are so corrupt that they refuse to take this case up and give us the relief we're obviously entitled to. So our only option at this point is to overthrow the United States government, go hit cops with flagpoles and mace and fire extinguishers so that we can get some justice around here. And that's basically the underpinning of Chesborough's advice here. That's problematic, and it isn't legal advice. That's true too. And I guess once you've already decided that there's a crime fraud exception here, that's just gonna, bolster that decision. So, all right, interesting. Of the chances of success, Chesborough estimated the odds that a court would grant effective relief before January 6th, I'd say only 1%. But, he wrote, the filing has possible political value. Mr. Chesborough wrote that it was hard to have enormous optimism about what will happen on January 6th, but a lot can happen in the 13 days left until then. And I think having as many states under review, both judicially and in state legislatures as possible, is ideal. They ended up, how many state legislatures did they get to review things? 0, by the way. Just want to put that out there. He said the legal filings could produce a political payoff, that's the quote, to bolster the argument that, quote, there should at least be extended debate in Congress about election irregularities in each state, even though they didn't exist. He added that the public should come away from this believing that the election in Wisconsin was likely rigged and stolen by Biden and Harris, who were not legitimately elected. That's some dubious legal advice, certainly. Responding to the email chain was John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who has also been charged in the Georgia election case. Eastman said he believed the legal arguments were rock solid, but the odds of success were not based on the legal merits, but an assessment of the justices' spines. And I understand that there is a heated fight underway. Chesborough responded, I particularly agree that getting this on file gives more ammo to the justices fighting for the court to intervene. I think the odds of action before January 6th will become more favorable if justices start to fear. And that, honestly, you should just end it there. Basically to say, we think our case becomes more likely to succeed, not because the legal merits become clearer, but we can instill fear of something, personally, in these justices. What do they want them to fear? Fear that there will be wild chaos on January 6th, unless they rule by then, either way. So that's interesting. Again, I guess it's sort of like a parallel to the Jim Jordan thing here, right? Members of Congress are saying, listen, I was willing to support him and be a good Republican, but when it comes to threatening me, that's when I start to shut off. That was Mario Diaz-Balart's view of things, right? When you start with the threats, I shut down. I stop listening to you. We heard slightly different interpretations of the same theme from other members, but certainly rejections of this resort to bullying tactics and threatening. But at the same, why were they doing it? Why was Jim Jordan doing it? Because that's all he knows. And he's an insurrectionist at heart, and the insurrectionist cadre was working under the assumption that that's a good and valuable way of approaching getting what you want politically, legally, and otherwise. Threaten people. So that's the theory here. If we make the justices afraid that if they don't take up this case there'll be wild chaos and possibly the overthrow of the United States government, which is, after all, their employer, then it increases the odds, at least, that they will say, all right, well, we don't know on what basis we're moving forward and we don't like the whole thing, but we feel forced to consider this case. Even if we rule opposite the way that Eastman and Chesborough and Trump want us to, we got to at least take it up. Now back to the article. Mr. Trump had posted to Twitter days before, of course, for his followers to come to the Capitol on January 6th, telling them to be there will be wild. And that's why Chesborough uses the word wild in describing the chaos on January 6th, before the fact. Thousands of supporters, Trump supporters, stormed the building, injuring at least 150 officers and delaying official proceedings of Congress. By the way, two things that didn't happen in the sit-in protest discussed in the early part of the show this morning. Not 150 officers injured, and no delaying of any official proceedings of Congress. Anyway, other emails that Mr. Chesborough sent are crucial in the Georgia case. On Wednesday, the judge overseeing the case, Scott McAfee, ruled that a handful of emails that Chesborough sought to shield from evidence are admissible under the crime fraud exception, the standard by which probable cause has been established that the correspondence or a lawyer's advice was used in furtherance of a crime. Chesborough and Sidney Powell, another Trump lawyer, are the only ones to seek speedy trials, as Georgia allows. Everybody allows it, but okay. Jury selection is scheduled to begin Monday, but won't happen for Sidney Powell because she's taking a plea deal. Photographs and videos reviewed by the New York Times suggest that Chesborough, a quiet Harvard Law graduate from Wisconsin, was in the crowd outside the Capitol on January 6th. That's pretty amazing that he found himself there. He had spent part of that day closely following a conspiracy theorist, Alex Jones, who helped lead a mob toward the building. And that's really one of the most surprising things I've read so far about Chesborough. I would have thought that he would have taken advantage of the opportunity to stay indoors, for one thing, and with the inner circle and plotting and, focusing on legal work as opposed to placing himself outdoors among the COVID-addled masses attacking the Capitol. But that I would think would undermine a little bit of his claim that he was merely doing legal work too. Here's every opportunity to actually do legal work on a very important day, legally speaking, but instead he's put himself out there with the crowd threatening Congress instead. I don't think he does himself any favors with that one. Okay, well, we've come to the end of the show, obviously. The music says so. Plenty more to deal with, but of course tomorrow's Friday and a good day to deal with all of these varying stories, some of which are directly political, others of which only touch on it tangentially, but in interesting ways. So it's time now, though, for us to turn things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which follows our show here today, as every day, on Netroots Radio. Guess what? Today, now I've got plenty of time to tell you what's going on Thursday's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and the summary's not there. Justice, quick, hit return on the thing and get me the, it's going to be 15 seconds before he hears this. Anyway, well, I'll tell you what, maybe he'll explain what was going on in the protest in the Capitol and how that got described as 30 grandmas from the Grandma Knitters Guild at the Capitol. Or return to the Brett Baer East Coast liberal story that we heard earlier this morning.
Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Or rather, East Coast elitist. Anyway, that $32 million mansion. I'm still intrigued by that. Okay, stay tuned, though. Justice will take you through the stories of the day, both here at home and internationally. Always a view to what's happening globally and overseas. So we'll see you tomorrow, Friday, for a final show this week. Stay tuned now for Justice.